Before coins took over the world, humans looked at shells, teeth, cheese, tobacco, whale gunk, iron rods, and actual poop, and somehow agreed, yes, this is money. Today we're counting down 32 of the weirdest things people used as currency before modern cash made everything boring, cleaner, and slightly less likely to smell like livestock. 1. Welcome to 18th century London. Right in the middle of the gin craze, when the city seemed to be running on cheap alcohol, bad lighting, and decisions nobody should make before breakfast. Gin was so cheap and available that it became less of a drink and more of a public health disaster in a bottle. And because some factory owners looked at human misery and saw an exciting payroll innovation, they began paying workers partly in gin. Not as a holiday bonus, not as a thanks for all your hard work. As wages. Imagine finishing a brutal shift and receiving a paycheck that immediately tries to sabotage your next shift. Saving for the future becomes complicated when your savings are sitting on the kitchen table, smelling like bad choices and whispering, "Come on, just one." The employer wins twice. The worker stays poor, the worker stays dependent, and the worker is probably too hungover to organize a complaint. It was corporate cruelty with juniper flavor. 2. In the Native American Northeast, wampum was not just a pile of pretty beads. It was a careful, skilled, culturally meaningful currency made from seashells, especially purple and white shell beads that took time, labor, and craft to produce. That difficulty mattered because scarcity and effort gave it value. Then, Europeans arrived, studied this elegant system for about 5 seconds, and immediately thought, what if we ruin it at industrial speed? With metal tools and steel drills, colonists began producing wampum much faster, flooding trade networks with huge quantities of beads. What had once been meaningful and labor-intensive could suddenly be pumped out like cheap souvenirs at a tourist trap. The result was economic distortion, cultural damage, and a very colonial version of inflation. It is like discovering that someone bought your neighborhood with counterfeit casino chips, then proudly calling it trade. The beads stayed shiny, but the system behind them got absolutely wrecked. 3. On the islands of Fiji, the ultimate symbol of value was not gold, silver, jewels, or anything that could fit neatly into a purse. It was a sperm whale tooth. These sacred objects, called tabua, carried enormous social and spiritual weight, and presenting one was not something you did casually between errands. A tabua could help arrange a marriage, seal a political alliance, ask forgiveness after a serious offense, or turn a tense negotiation into something people could actually survive. It was not pocket money, it was, "I am extremely serious, please notice the whale tooth money." Imagine sliding a briefcase across a table, except instead of cash, the briefcase contains a polished marine mammal tooth with ceremonial authority. Bigger and more beautiful teeth meant bigger messages. This created a world where whale anatomy could affect family politics, diplomacy, apologies, and social status. Somewhere, a whale's dental situation was doing more geopolitical work than half the royal courts of Europe. 4. In ancient Uruk, one of the first truly massive cities in human history, bureaucracy had already discovered one of its favorite hobbies: making workers' lives efficient in the saddest way possible. Thousands of laborers building temples and public structures could be paid with standardized clay bowls filled with grain or beer. These bevel-rimmed bowls were cheap, mass-produced, and found by archaeologists in enormous numbers, which means ancient Mesopotamia may have invented both urban civilization and the depressing cafeteria tray. Your wage was not a salary you could build on. It was dinner, drink, and disposable dishware in one rough little package. Eat the grain, drink the beer, return tomorrow, repeat until your back gives out. There was no savings plan, no promotion ladder, no future you getting richer. You literally consumed your paycheck every night. It was the original gig economy. Just enough calories to keep you alive, just enough beer to numb the misery, and absolutely no chance of buying a nicer bowl. 5. Just when it seems humanity might eventually stop trusting seashells as money, Papua New Guinea raises one hand and says, "Actually, we have a system." In East New Britain, the Tolai people still use traditional shell currency called tabu. These are not random beach shells collected by someone with a basket and too much free time. They are tiny NASA shells, gathered, processed, dried, and carefully threaded onto long strips of rattan. That labor gives them value, and the tradition gives them meaning. The system is so serious that dedicated shell money markets exist, and there has even been a shell money bank, with officials and ways to exchange shells in a more formal way. Modern finance may have apps, passwords, and digital dashboards, but taboo has something better: a satisfying rattle. People have tried adding serial numbers and fixed exchange rates, which makes the whole thing feel like an organic cryptocurrency you can hear from across the street. It is ancient, practical, beautiful, and still slightly hilarious. 6. In colonial Virginia, tobacco was not just a crop. It was the crop, the export, the obsession, and eventually the money. English settlers found that tobacco grew extremely well, and the colony leaned into it so hard that leaves basically became legal tender with a smoking problem. Taxes could be paid in tobacco. Fines could be paid in tobacco. Even education could be paid in tobacco, including tuition connected with the College of William and Mary. Imagine being a student and realizing your entire academic future is sitting in barrels, slowly curing into something your uncle will later smoke on a porch. The economy rose and fell with the harvest, which meant a bad growing season was not just disappointing for farmers. It could shake the whole colony. Rain, pests, or poor quality leaves could turn into financial crisis. Virginia had built an economy addicted to its own currency in the most literal possible sense. When your money is tobacco, inflation is bad, but mold might be worse. 7. In Italy's Emilia-Romagna region, someone looked at cheese and finance and decided they clearly belonged in the same vault. Banks have accepted giant wheels of authentic Parmigiano Reggiano as collateral for loans, because this cheese is valuable, carefully regulated, and becomes more precious as it ages. That means there are bank vaults filled not with gold bars or stacks of cash, but with rows of enormous cheese wheels resting under careful climate control like dairy royalty. It sounds like a dream pantry built by a millionaire mouse. If a producer cannot repay the loan, the bank can take the cheese. That is both terrifying and delicious. We regret to inform you that your Parmesan has been repossessed, may be the most Italian financial sentence ever created. It also changes bank robbery completely. A criminal would not just need drills, masks, and a getaway van. They would need forklifts, humidity control, crackers, and the patience to age their loot properly. 8. On ancient Crete, the Minoan civilization built palaces, trade networks, art, and a surprisingly oily financial system. Olive oil was one of their great products, and high-quality oil stored in large clay jars could function as a recognized unit of value. These big storage jars, called pithoi, were impressive, useful, and also dangerously breakable, which is not exactly what you want from a savings account. Your wealth might sit in a storeroom, gleaming in heavy jars, one earthquake away from becoming the world's most expensive salad dressing accident. Imagine the anxiety of being rich in liquid stored inside pottery. One clumsy servant, one bad shelf, one goat wandering where it should not, and your family fortune becomes a golden puddle spreading across the floor. Children, I have terrible news. Your inheritance is now under the table and smells delicious. The Minoans had liquid gold, but liquid gold has one major weakness: it does not bounce. 9. The word salary is often connected to the Latin word sal, meaning salt, and whether paid directly in salt or through allowances linked to it, Roman soldiers lived in a world where salt had serious economic power. This was not the sad little shaker hiding behind pepper on a modern dinner table. Salt preserved meat, fish, and other foods before refrigeration existed, which meant it could decide whether your supplies survived or turned into a biological crime scene. For a Roman legionary, salt was practical wealth. Picture soldiers comparing compensation like office workers comparing bonuses. Why did Marcus get more salt? He just stands near the aqueduct looking dramatic. In that world, spilling salt was not just a tiny accident or a superstition waiting to happen. It was wasted value. You were not merely making a mess. You were scattering preservation technology, dinner security, and a chunk of your economic dignity across the floor. 10. Across ancient China, Tibet, Mongolia, and Siberian trade zones, one of the most wonderfully practical currencies was the tea brick. It was exactly what the name promises. Tea leaves compressed into a dense block tough enough to survive long journeys, rough weather, and probably a small argument with a yak. Tea bricks were money, but they were also drink, medicine, status object, travel supply, and emergency comfort in one compact package. Need to buy a horse? Pay in bricks? Feeling cold? Shave off a piece and brew it? Feeling sick? Use it as a remedy. Someone is being deeply annoying? The brick had enough weight to make violence technically possible, though your accountant would frown. This was money that did not just represent value, it performed value. Modern paper money just sits there looking official. Tea money could warm your hands, settle your stomach, close a deal, and make a freezing caravan route feel slightly less like punishment. 11. The phrase, "so poor you have to eat dirt," sounds like a cruel metaphor, but in some places edible clay was real, useful, and valuable. In parts of Africa and South America, specially prepared mineral-rich clay could be shaped into small cakes, eaten as a supplement, and sometimes traded as a practical commodity. That means your money could also be lunch, which is either genius or the saddest financial app ever invented. These clay cakes were valued because they offered minerals and could help during scarcity, but they also created a bizarre economic problem. If times got hard enough, people might literally eat their savings. Imagine checking your net worth after breakfast and realizing it dropped because you were hungry. A chicken could be bought with clay, or the clay could be eaten if the market was slow and your stomach started negotiating. It was the only portfolio where diversification meant deciding which part of your wallet looked most edible. 12. In ancient Egypt, wealth was not just about what you could use while alive. It was also about what you might bring into the next world, because the Egyptians took afterlife planning more seriously than most people take taxes. Everyday transactions often involved grain, labor, and goods, but fine linen became one of the most reliable stores of value. High-quality woven cloth, known as shti, could hold worth for a long time, and wealthy people accumulated impressive quantities of it. Then came the twist that only Egypt could make feel normal. When you died, your finest linen could help wrap your body for mummification. You were not just buried with your savings, you were buried in them. Imagine a banker saying, "Your assets are very well preserved," and meaning it literally. It was financial planning, fashion, and corpse maintenance all at once. The afterlife outfit was not cheap, but at least nobody could accuse you of arriving underdressed. 13. Medieval Iceland was a place of volcanoes, glaciers, fierce weather, and an economy that looked at fish and said, "You are in charge now." Dried cod, called stockfish, became a major trade good because it lasted, traveled well, and mattered in a region where survival was not always polite. But you could not always carry stacks of dried fish around like a salty briefcase. So, Icelanders developed ways to trade promises of future fish. Merchants could exchange goods now for legally recognized claims to cod that would be delivered after the next fishing season. That is right. Imaginary future fish became a financial instrument. Before Wall Street made imaginary future, everything sounds sophisticated. Your wealth might depend on cod that had not even been caught yet, which must have made debt collection awkward. I would love to pay you, but the fish have not chosen cooperation. It was an economy built on trust, weather, boats, and the emotional availability of cod. 14. Rich people have always found ways to turn normal comfort into public theater, but one Himalayan ruler pushed luxury into pure cartoon territory. In a hot palace, he reportedly paid servants in gold to run up a mountain, collect snow, and sprint back before it melted, all so he could enjoy a chilled drink. This is what happens when refrigeration does not exist, but ego absolutely does. The servants were essentially early luxury delivery workers, except the product was fighting the laws of physics the entire trip. Every second mattered, because the snow was not merchandise so much as a disappearing insult to the climate. The ruler was paying in gold, one of humanity's most durable symbols of wealth, for snow, a substance whose main hobby is becoming water. That is not just spending, that is financial performance art. He was not buying a cold drink. He was buying the right to look at nature and say, "Not today, temperature." 15. Money depends on trust, and some societies took that truth so literally that they wrote debts and agreements on leaves. Leaves. The things trees casually drop because even trees know they are temporary. It sounds charming for about 2 seconds. Then you remember wind, rain, goats, insects, children, and the entire concept of autumn. Imagine trying to prove someone owed you 3 chickens, only to discover your contract had become lunch for a deer. Legal arguments must have been magnificent. Your Honor, the loan existed, but unfortunately the evidence was composted. Fraud could be as simple as finding a similar leaf and pretending your handwriting had always been that confident. A modern person losing a password is annoying. A leaf-based economy could lose records because a caterpillar got ambitious. It was the original green finance, not because it was sustainable in a noble way, but because your mortgage documentation might literally turn brown and fall off a branch. 16. Imagine walking along a beach and spotting a waxy gray lump that smells like seafood, stomach acid, and a bad decision made by the ocean. Most sane people would walk away. But that strange lump might be ambergris, a rare material associated with sperm whales and valued for centuries in luxury perfume making. It helped fragrances last longer, which meant rich people were willing to pay absurd sums for something that began its story somewhere inside a whale. The first person to discover its value must have been a heroic weirdo. Someone found a foul-smelling blob, did not run, did not call for help, and somehow thought, luxury. That is either genius or the strongest lack of boundaries in history. Ambergris turned whale digestive weirdness into elite fragrance chemistry. So the next time someone praises an expensive perfume, remember, beneath all that elegance may be a maritime gross-out story wearing a velvet jacket. 17. Ancient Greeks gave us philosophy, democracy, theater, geometry, and the Olympics. They also gave some regions one of the most inconvenient pre-coin currencies ever dragged into a marketplace: iron spits. These long metal rods, called oboloi, were the kind of thing you would expect to see holding roasted meat over a fire, not settling an invoice. Yet before coinage became widespread, bundles of these awkward rods could function as money. Buying something expensive meant carrying enough metal skewers to look less like a shopper and more like a nervous barbecue organizer. A wallet would be useless. You needed grip strength, balance, and enough awareness not to impale your neighbor while paying for olives. The system was heavy, clumsy, and aggressively pointy. Coins probably did not win because people loved elegant monetary reform. They won because everyone got tired of commerce feeling like a low-budget spear fight. 18. When formal economies collapse, one currency always seems to crawl out of the rubble wearing a leather jacket: the cigarette. After World War II, cigarettes became powerful trade goods in ruined cities and military zones. In prisons, they have often worked as shadow money too. The cigarette is a strange currency because it is useful, addictive, portable, divisible, and constantly trying to kill its owner. Economists love things that encourage circulation, and cigarettes definitely do that because hoarding them is hard when they keep whispering, "Light me." A person can literally burn through savings one small paper tube at a time. That makes cigarettes brutally honest money. They buy food, favors, protection, or a few minutes of calm in a world that has stopped making sense. Gold is noble. Paper money is official. Cigarettes are the currency of desperation, stress, and people pretending they are fine while the city is on fire. 19. In Siberia, where the cold can make your soul request a second coat, some shamans used hallucinogenic mushrooms in rituals meant to communicate with the spirit world. The human body, disgusting little chemist that it is, can filter out certain toxic elements while passing psychoactive compounds into urine. And because history refuses to behave, this led to practices where others drank that urine to experience a second-hand version of the effects. In some contexts, valuable goods like reindeer could be tied to this strange spiritual exchange. That means someone could trade a living animal for recycled mystical intoxication. Try putting that in a bank ledger without the clerk quitting. Debit, 1 reindeer. Credit, 1 warm cup of shamanic aftershock. Quality control must have been deeply uncomfortable. This batch feels weak. Has the shaman been drinking too much water? It is the only economy where trickle-down economics was not a theory. It was a beverage. 20. Some forms of money sit quietly in chests and behave themselves. The Lobi people of West Africa had ritual iron objects that were believed to hold spiritual force, and certain snake-like iron pieces could be used in powerful social and ceremonial transactions. These were not treated like dead metal. They were seen as charged, potent, almost living things. And if money has power, then naturally it might need care. Owners could ritually strengthen or feed such objects with offerings, including the blood of a sacrificed chicken. That turns personal finance into something halfway between banking and supernatural pet ownership. Forget checking your account balance. You had to worry whether your iron currency was spiritually satisfied. Miss the ritual, and maybe your wealth did not merely lose value. Maybe it became offended. Modern banks charge fees, which is annoying. But at least your savings account does not demand poultry blood to maintain its cosmic performance. 21. Strange money is not only ancient history. In parts of post-conflict Africa, when official currency became unstable or nearly worthless, people sometimes turned to objects that still had recognizable value, including beer bottle caps. The logic could begin with prize promotions, where certain caps could be redeemed for rewards. Then reality, being wonderfully messy, allowed caps to circulate as informal money. A cap from a popular brand could be worth far more than one from some sad off-brand soda nobody respected. Picture a marketing executive launching a simple promotion, unaware he had accidentally become the central banker of a desperate local economy. Suddenly, wealth did not fold neatly into a wallet. It clattered in pockets, sacks, and jars like garbage that had discovered purchasing power. Buying something expensive might mean arriving with a bag of caps and looking like a raccoon who had been studying monetary theory. It was ridiculous, practical, and born from real economic collapse. 22. In West Africa, the Kissi people used long iron rods known as Kissi pennies, and these were much stranger than ordinary metal money. Each rod had a distinctive shape, often with a flattened or forked end, and they could be bundled together for larger transactions, including bride wealth and major trade. But the strangest feature was spiritual. A Kissi penny was believed to possess a soul. If it broke, that soul was thought to escape, making the damaged money worthless. The solution was not a refund desk. The pieces had to be taken to a ritual specialist who could perform a ceremony to restore the spirit and rejoin the value, naturally for a fee. That means the currency had its own emergency room. Imagine snapping a bill in half and needing a priest, a blacksmith, and a service charge. The ritual experts basically controlled the central bank, the repair shop, and the spiritual customer support hotline. 23. Vikings were famous for raiding, sailing, trading, terrifying coastlines, and wearing beards that looked like they had their own battle plans. Their money could be just as direct. Hack silver was a system where silver objects were cut into pieces and valued by weight. Coins, jewelry, cups, ornaments, and sometimes objects recently liberated from monasteries could all become payment once chopped into useful chunks. Nobody cared much about the artwork, the royal face, or the delicate craftsmanship. The question was simple: how heavy is the silver? Transactions required scales, not a neat stack of coins. It was like paying for groceries by carving slices off your grandmother's silver spoon at the checkout. Brutal? Absolutely. Practical? Also absolutely. Hack silver was finance with an axe in its hand. It looked at beauty, history, and sentimental value and said, "That is nice, but how many grams are we talking about?" 24. In late 17th century Quebec, the French colony faced a serious shortage of coins because money shipments from France were delayed. A colony cannot simply pause every wage, debt, and purchase because the boat with the cash failed to arrive on time. So officials improvised with the confidence of people standing very close to disaster. They took playing cards, cut them into pieces, signed or marked them, and declared them money. Suddenly, cards were not just for gambling or passing a winter evening. They paid soldiers, settled accounts, and kept trade moving. A piece of cardboard with official handwriting could stand in for silver. Imagine paying rent with part of a deck and hoping nobody asks whether the King of Clubs has better exchange value than the Nine of Hearts. The entire colony briefly ran on emergency casino logic. It was desperate, clever, and proof that money is often just authority saying, "Trust this thing until the real money gets here." 25. High in the Andes, trees can be scarce, cold can be vicious, and fuel is not a luxury, it is survival. So people used what they had, and what they had in reliable supply was dried llama dung. Once dried, it burned well enough to heat homes and cook food, which made it extremely useful. And useful things can become valuable things. So yes, in some communities, poop could function like money. Not glamorous money, not elegant money, but try telling a freezing family that warmth lacks dignity. Dried dung was practical, local, and hard to counterfeit unless you owned the correct animal and a deeply suspicious amount of time. Wealth could be measured by your fuel pile, making filthy rich less of an insult and more of an inventory report. The main threat was weather. A sudden rainstorm could turn your stored fortune into a brown, collapsing disaster. That is not just a market crash. That is a market crash you can smell. 26. The Aztecs and Mayans understood something humanity has never forgotten. Cacao is powerful. Long before chocolate bars became checkout line temptation, cacao beans functioned as currency across parts of Mesoamerica. A few beans could buy small goods, and larger amounts could purchase serious items like turkeys, clothing, or services. The economy was, in a very real sense, fueled by the raw material of chocolate. But wherever value appears, fraud follows wearing a fake mustache. Counterfeiters created imitation cacao beans from clay, or hollowed out real beans and filled them with dirt, then mixed them with genuine ones. Imagine arriving at the market feeling financially confident, only for a merchant to crack your money open and reveal your fortune is basically mud in a chocolate costume. It is hard to imagine a more emotionally cruel financial system. Your wallet smelled like dessert, but bankruptcy could be hiding inside every bean. 27. In 18th century Scotland, especially in remote villages where official coins were scarce, people found value in things that were always needed. One surprisingly useful substitute was nails. A blacksmith was often one of the most important workers in town, and nails were essential for building, repairing, mining, farming, and keeping ordinary life from falling apart board by board. Because nails required labor and skill to produce, they could circulate locally as payment. Employers, including mine owners, sometimes paid workers in nails, which could then be spent at company stores or traded with others. It was practical, but also painfully literal. Your salary was not just money. It was a future fence, roof, door hinge, or emergency repair project. The downside was obvious the moment you sat down too quickly. Coins jingle, nails stab. A large bonus probably sounded nice until you realized you had to carry home a sack of sharp metal and explain to your family that prosperity had points. 28. On the Pacific island of Yap, money became so huge that portability simply gave up and went home. The famous rye stones were massive limestone discs with holes in the middle, some larger than a person and heavy enough to make any wallet file for early retirement. These stones were difficult to quarry and transport, which made them valuable, but the most brilliant part was that people did not always need to move them. Ownership was public knowledge. Everyone knew who owned which stone, so the stone could stay where it was while the value changed hands socially. One famous story tells of a rye stone that fell into the sea during transport and sank. Instead of declaring it lost, the community accepted that it still existed and still belonged to its owner, even though it had become luxury furniture for fish. That is money stripped to its core. Shared belief. Yap invented trust the ledger. Except the ledger was gossip and the asset was a giant underwater rock. 29. On the Solomon Islands, important payments could involve dolphin teeth, carefully drilled and strung into necklaces or bundles. These teeth could be used in major exchanges involving pigs, land, or marriage arrangements. This was not spare change. This was wealth that required hunting, processing, counting, stringing, and storing thousands of tiny white reminders that dolphins had a very bad day. The result could be visually impressive and culturally powerful, but it also had a dark edge, because dolphins were not exactly donating to the treasury. Financial planning becomes disturbing very quickly. Honey, if we want that new canoe, I may need to make a withdrawal from several dolphins. It gives the phrase paying through the teeth a deeply literal horror comedy flavor. There must have been worries about quality too. Was that really dolphin tooth? Or did someone try to sneak in something cheaper? It was beautiful money, meaningful money, and also money that smiled back at you in the most unsettling way possible. 30. For centuries in medieval England, debts were recorded with tally sticks, which were wooden sticks carved with notches showing amounts owed. The stick was then split lengthwise, so each party kept one half. Because the two halves matched uniquely, it was hard to fake the record. Simple, durable, clever, and very medieval. The system worked for a long time, especially for government accounting. Then in 1834, after paper records had replaced tally sticks, officials were left with piles of obsolete wooden financial history. Their solution was to burn them in furnaces beneath the Houses of Parliament. This sounds efficient until you remember that old buildings, dry wood, and overheated furnaces are a trio that should never be invited to the same meeting. The fire spread and destroyed much of the old Palace of Westminster. Britain's government literally set itself on fire while disposing of outdated accounting records. It is possibly the greatest this could have been handled better moment in administrative history. 31. In ancient China and India, ginger was not just something to make food taste alive again. It was useful enough to serve as a trade good and, in some contexts, a form of money. Ginger made sense as early currency because it was portable, divisible, aromatic, durable for a decent time, and valued for both cooking and medicine. Your wallet could season dinner, settle a trade, and help calm an upset stomach. That is a level of multitasking modern debit cards can only dream about. A marketplace using ginger probably smelled better than most ancient markets, which is a low bar but still a victory. Instead of nothing but sweat, livestock, smoke, and regret, there would be sharp, spicy warmth in the air. Personal finance and personal wellness sat in the same basket. Of all the strange money humans invented, ginger is one of the few that makes you pause and say, honestly, I see the vision. 32. The word buck for a dollar has roots in the frontier deerskin trade, when good quality buckskins were used as a common unit of value in exchanges among settlers, traders, and Native Americans. Before coins and paper money were easy to access everywhere, a properly prepared deerskin could stand in as practical currency. So when someone said something cost 10 bucks, that did not originally mean 10 neat bills from a leather wallet. It could mean 10 actual deer hides, stacked, carried, and probably smelling like the wilderness had strong opinions. Early American commerce was partly a continent-sized leather economy. Buying a rifle, tools, or supplies could mean bringing animal skins to the deal, not tapping a card like a civilized wizard. Making a quick buck sounds cute today, but the older reality was grimly physical. Find the deer, shoot the deer, skin the deer, cure the hide, then trade it. Your wealth depended on aim, labor, and Bambi, having a very unfortunate afternoon. So that was 32 times humanity looked at a random object and confidently said, "This should buy a goat." Now be honest, which one was the most unhinged? And which insane currency did we completely fail to mention? If you know a weirder one, drop it in the comments and defend it like your ancestors are watching. And if this video taught you that money has always been ridiculous, hit like and subscribe before someone starts paying creators in dried llama dung.